boom be sustained, or will the rupee slide undermine India's gains? What does this mean for the common man as prices climb and imports get costlier? Today, we examine why this duality GDP up, rupee down has emerged, who stands to gain, who bears the pain, and what policies might fix the balance. And this is the big story of the day. India's economy delivered a staggering performance in the quarter ending September 2025, with real GDP growth clocking at 8.2%, well above expectations. This surge marks the fastest growth in 6 quarters, driven by strong momentum across manufacturing, constructions and services. A broad-based optimum that underscores the resilience of domestic demand, industrial activity and household consumption. Analysts attribute this growth to a mix of factors: proactive production ahead of festive season, reduction in key taxes like GST on many products, improved rural demand, healthier private consumption, and sustained public and private investment. The combined effect has not only reinforced investor confidence, but also revived hopes of a full year GDP expansion comfortably above 7%. But yet, even the economy accelerates, India's currency is enduring a historic slump. The Indian rupee slipped past psychologically important 90 rupees to a US dollar, marking a record low for the currency. The slide has been sharp and sustained, marking the rupee one of the worst performing Asian currencies of this year. Let's know the detailed report of today's topic: GDP hits but rupee dips.
India's economy presented a striking paradox this week. On one hand, the rupee slipped beyond the 90 mark against the US dollar, a level never seen before. On the other, official data confirmed that GDP growth surged past 8% in the latest quarter, marking one of the strongest performances in recent years. This unusual combination of a weakening currency and robust growth has sparked debate among economists, policymakers and the public about whether the two signals are contradictory or simply reflective of different forces at play. The rupee's sharp depreciation is being attributed to foreign portfolio outflows, strong global dollar trends and rising import demand. Analysts point out that despite India's strong domestic output, external pressures continue to weigh heavily on the currency. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Statistics reported GDP growth at 8.2% for Q2 FY 25 to 26, driven by manufacturing and services. Economists highlighted that strong domestic demand and investment are powering growth even as vulnerabilities in external balances persist. Experts explain that GDP and currency movements are not necessarily contradictory. GDP reflects domestic production and consumption, while the rupee's value is shaped by global capital flows, trade balances, and investor sentiment. Growth data is backward-looking, capturing what has already happened in the economy, whereas currency prices are forward-looking, reacting instantly to global shocks and financial flows. This means that India can simultaneously record strong growth while facing currency weakness. Globally, the dollar index has surged, putting pressure on emerging market currencies across the board. India's rupee is moving in line with peace, with similar declines seen in other Asian currencies. The rupee's fall is therefore part of a larger global trend rather than a reflection of domestic weakness. For households and businesses, the impact of a weaker rupee is mixed. Imports such as crude oil, machinery, and tuition abroad becomes costlier, raising inflation risks and widening the current account deficit. At the same time, exporters benefit from higher rupee earnings and remittance receivers gain more value from dollars sent home. Students abroad and families dependent on imported goods feel the pinch, while sectors like IT services and textiles may find opportunities in the currency slide. The Reserve Bank of India is expected to monitor volatility closely. Its focus remains on inflation and growth, with calibrated intervention in the currency market to smooth disorderly moves. Policymakers are watching crude prices, current account trends, foreign portfolio flows, and US interest rate decisions to gauge the rupee's trajectory. Intervention is likely to be measured, avoiding heavy distortions while ensuring stability. In expert discussions, economists debated whether strong GDP growth can insulate India from the rupee's weakness. Some argued that growth momentum provides resilience, while others warned that persistent currency depreciation could complicate inflation management. The balance between conserving reserves and preventing disorderly depreciation was highlighted as a key policy challenge. Analysts also discussed thresholds such as crude oil prices and current account deficits that could trigger more aggressive intervention. To recap, GDP growth above 8% demonstrates India's resilience and strong domestic demand. The rupee at 90 reflects global headwinds and financial market pressures. These signals are not contradictory, but rather complementary indicators of different aspects of the economy. Policymakers face the challenge of sustaining growth momentum while shielding households and businesses from currency-driven costs. The contrasting signals, record growth alongside a record rupee low, underscore the complexity of India's economic landscape. As one economist put it, India's growth story remains intact, but the rupee's weakness is a reminder of global headwinds. Another added, policy intervention must be calibrated to avoid inflationary spillovers. In conclusion, India stands at a crossroads where domestic resilience meets external vulnerability. The story of GDP and the rupee is not one of contradiction but of coexistence, reminding us that economic health is multidimensional and shaped by both internal strength and global currents.
So, how did this paradox, high growth amid currency weakness, arise? The reasons are multiple and interlinked. First, there has been a massive outflow of foreign capital. Foreign portfolio investors and global funds have pulled money out of Indian equities, spooked by global economic uncertainty. Higher yields abroad and shifting risk sentiment. Second, India's import bill soared, especially for the essential imports like oil, machinery, electronics and industrial inputs, driving up demand for dollars and placing downward pressure on Indian rupee. Third, global macro conditions, including a strong US dollar, higher global interest rates and tighter financial conditions, have made emerging market currencies like the rupee vulnerable. Fourth, uncertain trade relations with major partners and recent tariffs on Indian exports have hit trade flow and foreign exchange inflows, exacerbating external sector stress. Finally, the central bank's stance appeared to tolerate a degree of depreciation instead of defending a fixed rate. It has focused on limiting short-term volatility, but has not staunchly intervened to reverse the rupee's downward slide. Recently, at the 2025 Hindustan Times Leadership Summit, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman acknowledged the Indian rupee's recent slide, but urged investors and citizens not to panic. She argued that the currency must be judged against current economic fundamentals, not past benchmarks, pointing to strong growth, record low inflation and resilient GDP numbers as reasons for confidence. With inflation down and growth on track, she insisted that the rupee will find its own way. Let's watch the visual from her social media handout.
Because there are multiple dimensions to this story. One is, of course, the economic dimension, which is, so when a currency weakens naturally, right, and I would like to look at all the macro factors that are happening and all that, and you have to look at it economically and assess whether it's worrisome or not. But there is also a very strong, you could say it's erroneous, but there's also a very strong nationalist and political aspect to the currency. Every time the currency weakens, people feel, oh my God, India has become weaker. Every time the currency weakens, parties, the opposition parties can raise the issue. Of course, it's another matter entirely that when you were in the opposition, all of you raised it so much better than the current opposition is doing. The rupee, you said it will find its natural level, but don't you think at the level that it's at right now, it's a little high, isn't it?
Sukma, I'm quite tempted to say a lot of things on this.
You should just feel free.
But no, rupee, currency, exchange rates are all rather too sensitive. I'm not escaping your comment that, oh, when you were in the opposition, you did. Yes, when we were in the opposition, we did. And I'm glad you recognize that we did it much better, because the situation at that time in the economy was so absolutely pathetic. Your inflation rate was so high, particularly the core inflation was so high, the economy was fragile, and when your currency also takes a hit, it is nobody's bright spark that you will comment on the exchange rate. Every one of us did, and we did it definitely, and every session of the parliament we did it, and those of us who were not in the parliament then were saying it outside as well. I'm not saying the situation on the currency debate can be different. It can be the same even now, but look at the fundamentals of the economy. Look at where Indian economy stands. Look at the growth. Look at where we are pitched now, from fourth to the third sooner. So there are some factors which are very important factors, which position India in a different ledge, and as a result of which I think this currency debate will have to be circumscribed by those realities, rather than compare it black and white with the situation then and say, that time you criticized, now you tell me, now I'll tell you more about the economy before I tell you about the currency. So there are, I think, facts which have to play the fundamental for a debate. Now for the exchange rate, obviously, when your currency the value comes down, you think the natural argument would be, oh, for our exporters, it will be brilliant, they should capitalize on it. And I'm sure our exporters have started to benefit from it. I'm not saying, therefore, it satisfies me. But the fact also, some of the observers have said, by coincidence, and I'm not saying this is planned at all, let me underline this. By coincidence, some people observe that at a time when you had this tariff coming on you, this seems to be some respite. Doesn't convince me again. Even if it is true, I'm not going to be satisfied with that. But it is true that economy's strength will have to be, as they say in Parliament, read along with it. You know, section so and so read along with that. Please read this with that.
Got it. I want to come back to the rupee because there are multiple dimensions to this story. One is, of course, the economic dimension, which is, so when a currency weakens naturally, right, and I would like to look at all the macro factors that are happening and all that, and you have to look at it economically and assess whether.
This unusual dynamic, soaring GDP alongside a sinking currency, has mixed consequences. On the positive side, a weaker rupee can be a boon for export-oriented industries, which earn in dollars but incur costs in rupees, improving their competitiveness abroad. For firms and sectors that generate foreign exchange revenue like IT services, software exports, certain manufacturing and remittance based household, rupee depreciation translates into better local currency value and potentially higher profitability or income. It may also help India improve external competitiveness, narrow trade imbalances over time, and encourage substitution away from imports. However, downsides are real and potentially painful. A depreciated rupee makes imported goods and services more expensive. Critical items such as fuel, industrial inputs, electronics, medicines, and consumer goods, thereby driving imported inflation. Every household may see rising bills, higher cost of living, and erosion of purchasing power. Students studying abroad or families with foreign denominated expenses face steep increases. For business that rely heavily on imported raw materials or capital goods, input costs go up, squeezing profit margins, discouraging new investments and potentially leading to downward pressures on growth and jobs. Also, consistent currency weakness may dent investor sentiment, especially foreign investors, making capital inflows unpredictable, which could destabilize markets and complicate external debt servicing. Amongst this turmoil, Reserve Bank of India Governor Sanjay Malhotra has reiterated that the central bank does not target any specific level for the rupee, allowing market forces to determine its value. Speaking amid heightened attention as the currency briefly breached the 90 per dollar mark, he emphasized that the RBI intervenes only to curb extreme volatility and not to support the rupee. Governor Malhotra's comments underline the central bank's approach of permitting the currency to move freely while ensuring the stability in the external sector.
See, our stated policy always has been that we allow the markets to determine. I mean, we don't target any price levels or any bands. We allow the markets to determine the prices. We believe that the markets in the long run especially are very efficient. It's a very deep market. We saw this earlier in February. The rupee to dollar had climbed up to almost 88, and within a period of 3 months it came back to below 84. So these fluctuations, this volatility does happen, can happen. Our effort has been always to reduce any abnormal or excessive volatility, and that is what we will continue to endeavor. Our external sector, as I also mentioned in my statement, is very strong going forward. We do believe that we are having sufficient reserves. Current account is very manageable at about 1% or so, and given the strong fundamentals of our country, we should get good capital flows as well going forward. So I think we are in a very comfortable situation insofar as second question on the rupee. See, our stated policy always has been that
in short, while GDP growth offers a bright headline, the rupee cash services a warning signal pointing at structural vulnerabilities in external sector, sensitivity to global flows and potential socio-economic costs for the common citizen. In the political and policy sphere, this has triggered a renewed debate. Critics argue that currency resilience should matter just as much as GDP growth because falling rupee affects the common man's wallet. Supporters counter that growth fundamentals are strong and a competitive rupee works in favor of exports and long-term global integration. As of now, the government and the Reserve Bank of India appear to be trending cautiously, focusing on stabilization rather than defending arbitrary exchange rate levels. What needs to happen next is a balanced policy approach. The central bank and the government must work together to stabilize foreign exchange flows, incentive export and domestic production, reduce import dependence and shield vulnerable segments from inflation. Structural reforms to improve trade balance, deepen domestic capital markets, diversify foreign exchange sources and encourage hedging will be crucial. Social protection measures to cushion households from price shocks will also help preserve the gains from growth, because this isn't just about numbers, it's about people. The story of 2025 is a booming economy and a battered currency. If managed wisely, India can ride its growth momentum while safeguarding its economic stability. If not, the rupee slide could erode real incomes, inflame costs and threaten long-term gains. These are the expert opinions. The political debates still continue, as I have mentioned. And interestingly, nowadays the opponents are sharing the file pictures or the file videos of Narendra Modi, who was the Gujarat Chief Minister before he has become the Prime Minister in 2013-2014 era, when he was targeting the then UPA government. And we need to remember one particular thing, that under the UPA government, the GDP at times has crossed the double digit, and rupee probably from 45 roughly to 60, it has changed its volatility. But one thing we have to remember is, during that particular era from 2004 to 2015, the world has faced two global crises. The then Gujarat Chief Minister, and preparing for the national leadership, he frequently criticized the then Congress government over the rupee's decline. In one of his most quoted remarks, he mocked that both the Prime Minister and rupee had lost value, a jibe made when the currency hovered around 60 to the dollar. These comments, resurfacing into 2025 media debates, are now used by critics as ironic ammunition, since the rupee has crossed much higher levels under his own premiership. In contrast, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has consistently framed rupee movements as a reflection of global dollar strength rather than domestic weakness. Let's watch the Modi file visual when he was the Gujarat Chief Minister and targeting the then Manmohan Singh government.
रुपया कमजोर होता जा रहा है। विश्व व्यापार में भारत टिक नहीं पाएगा। हमारे व्यापारी जो माल बाहर भेजते हैं, हमारे व्यापारी जो माल बाहर चलाते हैं, इस बोझ को सह नहीं पाएंगे। इवन भारत सरकार जो चीजें लाती है, भेजती है, उसको सहना मुश्किल हो जाएगा। और दिल्ली की सरकार जवाब नहीं दे रही है कि नेपाल का रुपया कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, बांग्लादेश की करेंसी को कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, पाकिस्तान की करेंसी को कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, श्रीलंका की करेंसी को कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। हमारे अड़ोस पड़ोस में छोटे देशों को भी डॉलर के मुकाबले में कोई नुकसान नहीं हो रहा है। देश जानना चाहता है, प्रधानमंत्री जी, ऐसा क्या कारण है कि आज अकेला हिंदुस्तान का रुपया डॉलर के मुकाबले गिरता ही चला गया और क्यों चला गया? और मैंने साफ मांग की है, ये सिर्फ आर्थिक कारणों से नहीं हुआ है, ये आपकी भ्रष्ट राजनीति जो चली है दिल्ली से, उसका इसके अंदर बहुत बड़ा रोल है। बहुत गंभीरता से आरोप लगा रहा है।
ये ऐसे नहीं होता मित्रों, मैं शासन में बैठा हूं, मुझे मालूम है इस प्रकार से रुपया इतनी तेजी से गिर नहीं सकता। अरे नेपाल का रुपया नहीं गिरता है, बांग्लादेश की करेंसी नहीं गिरती है, पाकिस्तान की करेंसी नहीं गिरती, श्रीलंका की करेंसी नहीं गिरती। क्या कारण है हिंदुस्तान का रुपया पतला होता जा रहा है? ये जवाब देना पड़ेगा आपको। देश आपसे जवाब मांग रहा है।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi is silent now. And on the other side, even Nirmala Sitharaman, who was a prominent figure in the BJP and 2004 to 2015 era and was official spokesperson of the BJP, has also made similar remarks against the UPA government then. Later on, the government has changed and she has become the first full-fledged finance minister and the first woman who has presented the budget as a full-fledged finance minister. And now probably she is going to have the record in her name where she can present more number of budgets than any other finance minister in the history of India. But one thing is interesting, The same Nirmala Sitharaman, like Narendra Modi, has targeted UPA government then, but now when she has become the finance minister, she has a different story. She has argued that India's fundamentals remain strong and the depreciation is largely driven by external factors such as capital flows and strengthening of US dollar. This is a very important remark. During the UPA era, she criticized the government, but when she has become the finance minister, she said that Indian rupee is not depreciating, but the US dollar is increasing. It is growing well. Her repeated defense of the rupee in these terms has been cited in public discussions, often juxtaposed against opposition claims of policy responsibility. The broader political takeaway is that currency inflections in India are not just economic events but also rhetorical tools. Opposition leaders recycle past jibes to highlight perceived failures, while finance ministers emphasize global macroeconomics. This dynamic underscores how the rupee's symbolic value makes it a recurring focal point with narratives, and Union Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has addressed the media in Washington, D.C. a couple of years back during her official visit to the United States, where she highlighted India's economic resilience and the government's policy priorities. At that particular time, she said the same thing, that Indian rupee is not depreciating, rather US dollar is performing well, and this is often criticized by her opponents. Sitharaman underscored that the rupee recent movement should be viewed in the context of global dollar strength rather than as a sign of domestic weakness, reiterating that India's economy remains on a solid footing. And absolutely, this would be the same situation even now, because the GDP has crossed 8.2, and on the other side, rupee has fallen 90 per dollar. Her remarks reflected both reassurance to the domestic audience and a message to international stakeholders. Let's watch the file video, what she has said about the rupee versus dollar a couple of years back in Washington.
Question. I quite take the suggestion given by Honorable Member Vivek Tanka. Certainly, one of the things which we like to consider, I'm not giving it as an assurance because it's more in the domain of the RBI. But there are discussions between the government and the RBI to see how best we can have various different similar such schemes through which we are able to draw foreign remittances which are directly, like the way you've said, foreign currency remittances into the accounts and so on. There has been something which the RBI has already worked on and also announced in the recent past. However, with all this said, on the value of the Indian rupee,
That was Nirmala Sitharaman as the finance minister addressing the Lok Sabha on the same topic a couple of years back. Unfortunately, we could not bring you, because of the technical snag, the video of what she has told on the same topic in Washington. But now another interesting fact has happened. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has clarified in the Lok Sabha that the IMF assessment of India's economy remains largely positive, despite a C rating on national accounts data. The IMF projects India's GDP growth at 6.5% for financial year 26, citing strong private sector expansion, macroeconomic stability, and the resilience of the financial system as key growth drivers. The finance minister explained that the C grade was awarded solely because India's national accounts are still based on 2011-12 base year. She confirmed that the government is updating these year to 2022-23 with the revised series set to be implemented from 27th February 2026. The IMF, she said, has not raised any concerns about the credibility of India's growth numbers.
and data issue. I would want to use this opportunity to explain that that debate was very ill-informed. IMF has actually said India's overall healthy economic performance